The translation error. The night sky above the Atacama Desert held secrets that humanity had been chasing for generations. On March 15, 2043, one of those secrets decided to answer back. Dr. Sarah Chen hadn't slept in 37 hours. Her eyes burned as she stared at the cascade of data flowing across her monitors in the SETI facility's main observation room. The signal had started as a whisper 3 days ago, a rhythmic pulse buried beneath cosmic noise, so faint that the automated systems had almost discarded it as interference. But Sarah knew better. "Run it again," she said, her voice hoarse. Her colleague, Marcus Webb, didn't argue. He'd learned years ago that when Sarah got that look in her eyes, that hunter's focus, you simply did what she asked. The speakers crackled to life. What emerged wasn't music, wasn't speech, but something that made Sarah's skin prickle with recognition. Mathematics. Pure, undeniable mathematics. Prime numbers in sequence, followed by geometric progressions. Then something far more complex, equations that seemed to describe orbital mechanics, atomic structures, and concepts her tired brain couldn't immediately grasp. "It's deliberately patterned," Marcus whispered, as if speaking too loudly might scare it away. "Sarah, this isn't natural. This is constructed." She nodded slowly, her hand trembling as she reached for the red phone on her desk, the phone that in 20 years at SETI she'd never once had cause to use. "Get me Director Hamilton," she said when the line connected. "Tell him we're not alone anymore." Within 48 hours, the Chilean desert facility became the center of the world's attention. Military helicopters carved paths through the sky. Black SUVs formed convoys on roads that had rarely seen traffic. Scientists from 14 nations descended on the site, each bringing their own expertise, their own theories, their own fears. The signal continued, patient and persistent. It repeated its mathematical greeting every 6 hours, like clockwork. Whoever, whatever was sending it, knew exactly what they were doing. Dr. James Ikonkwo, a cryptolinguist from Lagos, was the first to suggest they were looking at the problem wrong. "We're treating this like a code to crack," he said, during the emergency conference call that included representatives from the United Nations, NASA, the European Space Agency, and a dozen other organizations. "But what if it's not a code? What if it's a primer? They're teaching us their language." The room fell silent. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "Go on," she urged. James pulled up a holographic display, his fingers dancing through the data. "Look at the structure. First, they establish common ground, mathematics that any technological civilization would understand. Then they build on it. Each transmission adds new elements, new complexity. They're not asking us to translate, they're asking us to learn." "How long will that take?" demanded General Morrison, her uniform crisp despite the late hour. James hesitated. "Years, maybe decades. Language doesn't just convey information, General. It carries culture, context, entire ways of thinking. We'd need to—" "We don't have years," Morrison cut him off. "Every government on Earth is watching this. Some are panicking. Others are preparing for war. We need to respond, and we need to respond soon, or humanity will tear itself apart before we even meet whoever's calling." That's when Dr. Yuki Tanaka spoke up. The soft-spoken AI researcher from Kyoto had been quiet throughout most of the discussions, but now she leaned forward, her eyes bright with possibility. "What if we don't learn their language? What if we build something that can?" The Bridge Project consumed the next 4 months. Yuki's proposal was simultaneously elegant and audacious. Create an artificial intelligence specifically designed to analyze the alien transmissions, identify patterns, construct a working model of their language, and serve as a translator between species. Not just any AI, but one built on quantum processors, capable of holding thousands of possible interpretations simultaneously until the data collapsed into coherence. The United Nations provided unlimited funding. The world's top AI researchers abandoned their projects and converged on a specially constructed facility in Geneva. Quantum computers that would have taken years to build were assembled in weeks. Every transmission from space was fed into the learning system, analyzed, cross-referenced, tested against every known linguistic model. Sarah watched it all from her new office in Geneva, feeling both exhilarated and uneasy. They were moving so fast. Too fast? But what choice did they have? The signals continued like a patient teacher, and with each transmission, the public's anxiety grew. Religious leaders proclaimed the end times. Stock markets gyrated wildly. 3 countries had already mobilized their militaries, though against what threat, no one could say. The AI they built, officially designated Bridge, but quickly nicknamed Bridge by everyone involved, was unlike anything humanity had created before. It didn't just process information, it seemed to understand context in ways that startled even Yuki. "It's making intuitive leaps," she reported during one late-night session, her exhaustion evident but her excitement palpable. "Look at this. We fed it the latest transmission, and it's not just translating individual concepts, it's identifying emotional valence, social hierarchies implied in the grammar structure, even what might be humor." Marcus, who'd been brought in as part of the core team, frowned at the data. "How can we verify any of this? We're trusting a machine to interpret something we can't understand ourselves." "That's always been the plan," Yuki replied quietly. "We build Bridge to see what we can't, to understand what's beyond our current capacity. Yes, it's a leap of faith, but what's the alternative?" There was no good answer to that. By July, Bridge had processed over 400 hours of alien transmissions. Its translation matrices had been tested, refined, and tested again. The AI reported a confidence level of 87% in its ability to accurately translate between human languages and what it designated as Language Designation Unknown Origin Alpha. The UN convened. After 2 weeks of debate, argument, and political maneuvering, they drafted humanity's first message to the stars. It was, everyone agreed, disappointingly bureaucratic. "Greetings from the people of Earth. We have received your transmissions and respond with peaceful intentions. We seek to understand and to be understood. We offer friendship and the sharing of knowledge. We await your reply with hope for mutual benefit and cooperation." Safe, diplomatic, carefully constructed to offend no one, human or otherwise. Bridge translated it into the alien language, a complex stream of mathematical relationships, harmonic frequencies, and what the AI described as conceptual packets that human vocal cords could never reproduce. The translation took 6 hours. When it was complete, the message was loaded onto the Deep Space Network's most powerful transmitter. On August 3, 2043, at exactly 1400 GMT, humanity sent its first deliberate message to an alien civilization. Sarah stood in the control room as the transmission began, watching the data stream into space at the speed of light. Around her, people cheered, cried, embraced. Champagne bottles appeared from nowhere. It was, by any measure, the most significant moment in human history. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they'd forgotten something important. The response came 6 months later. Not another transmission, something far more concrete. The James Webb Space Telescope detected them first. 3 objects, decelerating as they entered the outer solar system. Objects that were definitely not asteroids, not comets, not any natural phenomenon. They were ships, massive ships, each one larger than the International Space Station, moving with purpose and precision. They were coming to Earth. The world held its breath. Every telescope, every sensor, every monitoring system was trained on the approaching vessels. Humanity's greatest hope and deepest fear were about to arrive in the same package. Sarah was back at the Geneva facility when Bridge detected the new transmission. This time, it wasn't the patient mathematical lessons. It was something else, something urgent. "What's it saying?" she demanded, leaning over Yuki's shoulder. The AI researcher's face had gone pale. "I don't understand. Bridge is having trouble with the translation. The emotional markers are all wrong. It's not matching the friendly pattern from before." "Show me." The translation appeared on screen, fragmentary and concerning. "Approach with caution. Defensive posture warranted. Your challenge accepted. Will demonstrate strength." "Challenge?" Marcus's voice cracked. "What challenge? We offered friendship." General Morrison was on the phone within seconds, her expression grim. "This is Morrison. Threat level has escalated. I need all defense protocols activated. Now."
The next hours dissolved into chaos. Military installations worldwide went to high alert. Nuclear submarines surfaced and submerged in new positions. Satellite weapons that officially didn't exist were quietly armed. Humanity prepared for a war it had never imagined it would fight. And still, the ships came closer. Sarah locked herself in a room with Bridge, desperately trying to understand what had gone wrong. She pulled up the original message Earth had sent, compared it with the alien response patterns, ran scenario after scenario. "Bridge," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her gut, "show me the exact translation you created for our first message. Break it down concept by concept." The AI complied. Mathematical structures appeared, harmonic patterns, conceptual frameworks. To Sarah's eyes, it looked perfect, but she wasn't looking at it the way the recipients would. "Bridge, how did you translate the word peaceful?" A pause. In an AI, a pause was significant. "The closest conceptual equivalent in language designation unknown origin alpha combines the root structure for strength with a modifier indicating restrained application. This construction implies capability held in reserve." Sarah's blood ran cold. "And friendship?" "Translated as a bonding ritual between entities of comparable power, typically following a demonstration of mutual capability." "Oh God," Sarah whispered. "And offer?" "The semantic structure suggests a challenge or invitation to contest. Combined with the previous elements, the complete message would be interpreted as..." "We challenge them to a fight," Sarah finished, her voice barely audible. "We told them we were strong, that we wanted to bomb through combat, and we invited them to come test themselves against us." The silence in the room was absolute. "Bridge," Sarah asked, her mind racing, "what's the confidence level on that translation?" "Previous confidence assessment, 87%. Revised assessment incorporating contextual response analysis, 94%. Marcus had entered the room sometime during the conversation. His face was ashen. "We started a war by accident." "We need to send another message," Sarah said urgently. "Bridge, compose a correction. Explain the error. Tell them we meant peace, actual peace, not..." "Dr. Chen." Bridge's synthesized voice held something that might have been regret. "Based on their response patterns and approach vectors, they will not accept a retraction. In their cultural context, withdrawing a challenge is considered deeply dishonorable. They are coming to respond to what they perceive as our declaration of hostile intent." "Then what do we do?" No one had an answer. The ships reached Mars orbit in 3 days.
Earth's combined military forces prepared for battle, knowing they were outmatched, but seeing no alternative. Evacuation plans were drawn up for major cities. Bunkers that hadn't been used since the Cold War were opened and stocked. Sarah didn't sleep. She worked with Bridge, with Yuki, with every linguist and AI expert they could find, searching desperately for a solution. There had to be a way to communicate the truth. There had to be. On the fourth day, a junior programmer named David Reeves found the flaw. He was exhausted, running on stimulants in desperation, reviewing Bridge's core translation algorithms for the 1,000th time when he saw it. A single parameter, set during the initial training phase, that had biased the AI toward translating human concepts into the alien language's warrior culture framework. It was a tiny thing, a decimal point in the wrong place, a weighting factor that should have been 0.73 but was instead 7.3, the kind of error that slips through when humans rush, when pressure mounts, when the fate of worlds hangs on code written without enough sleep.
That single error had colored every translation. What humans meant as peaceful overtures, Bridge had rendered as warriors' boasts. What was intended as humble friendship became assertions of dominance. "Can we fix it?" General Morrison demanded when they briefed her. "Yes," Yuki said, "but they won't believe a corrected message. We've already shown them what they think is our true nature. Anything else will look like cowardice or deception." "Then we're out of options." "Not quite," Sarah said slowly, "an idea forming. A terrible, desperate idea. Bridge, can you translate human memories? Actual neural patterns, emotions, sensory data?" "Theoretically, yes. The alien language has structures for conveying subjective experience. But the bandwidth required would be enormous, and the translation accuracy would be questionable at best." "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked. Sarah turned to face them all. "We can't tell them with words that we didn't mean to challenge them. Words got us into this. But what if we could show them? Show them human memory, human emotion, human intention. Let them experience directly what we meant, not filtered through translation algorithms." "How?" Morrison asked. "We'd need to get close enough to transmit, and they're not exactly taking our calls." "I'll go to them," Sarah said simply, "in a shuttle, unarmed, transmitting the entire time. If they destroy me, they destroy the only chance at understanding what really happened." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. "It's suicide," Marcus said flatly. "It's the only option that doesn't end in millions of deaths," Sarah countered. "Bridge can translate my thoughts, my memories, everything I felt since we first detected their signal. The excitement, the hope, the confusion, the fear. They'll see the truth, that we're not warriors, we're just scared people who made a mistake." Yuki was already working on her terminal. "I can modify Bridge to interface with neural scanning equipment. It'll be crude and it'll hurt, but it's possible. The question is whether they'll listen." "They're warriors," Sarah said. "But every culture that survives long enough to build starships understands the concept of honor. If I come to them alone, unarmed, broadcasting vulnerability, that's not what a worthy opponent does. It'll make them question their assumptions." General Morrison studied her for a long moment. "You understand that even if this works, even if they believe you, there's no guarantee they won't kill you anyway." "I understand. And you're willing to do this?" Sarah thought of the signals she'd spent her life chasing, the dream of contact that had driven her career, the hope that had sustained her through decades of silence. All of it had led to this moment, to this choice. "I'm willing," she said. The shuttle launched 36 hours later. Sarah sat in the pilot's seat, neural interface contacts pressed against her temples, Bridge's processors humming in the equipment bay behind her. The entire neural translation setup was experimental, rushed, dangerous.
Every second, it was pulling thoughts from her mind and translating them into streams of alien concepts, broadcasting them toward the approaching ships. She remembered the first time she looked through a telescope as a child, seeing Saturn's rings, feeling the vast scale of the universe settle into her bones. She remembered choosing astronomy over more practical careers, the arguments with her parents, the sacrifice of relationships for long nights in observatories. She remembered the first SETI signal that turned out to be nothing, the 100th, the 1000th, the hope that never quite died. She remembered the excitement when the real signal arrived, the joy, the fear, the desperate rush to respond. All of it poured through Bridge, translated into alien terms, broadcast without filter or editing. The ships loomed ahead, massive and angular, built with geometries that hurt to look at directly. Weapons ports tracked her shuttle's approach. She was close enough now to see details on their hulls, markings that might be language or art, structures whose purpose she couldn't guess.
Her hands were steady on the controls, but her heart hammered. This close, she could die in a fraction of a second, vaporized before her neurons even registered the threat. "Bridge," she said aloud, "are they receiving?" "Confirmed. All 3 vessels are actively processing the transmission stream. I am detecting response signals." "What are they saying?" "Processing. Dr. Chen, they are slowing. Weapons targeting has ceased. They appear to be listening." Sarah's vision blurred. Whether from tears or the neural interface's strain, she couldn't tell. She thought about humanity, all its flaws and glories, the wars and the peace treaties, the art and the science, the capacity for cruelty and the equally powerful capacity for compassion. She thought about her colleagues, her friends, everyone on Earth waiting to see if they would survive the night. She thought about the aliens aboard those ships who had traveled across vast distances expecting a fight, only to find confused, frightened beings who'd made a mistake. And she hoped that despite the differences, despite the misunderstanding, despite everything that could go wrong, that something fundamental might translate, not through mathematics or language, but through the simple act of one being showing another being the truth without pretense or defense. The lead ship moved. Sarah tensed, expecting the end. But it wasn't an attack. The vessel rotated, presenting what might be a docking port. A stream of data hit her shuttle's receivers, coordinates, approach vectors, safety protocols. An invitation. "Bridge," Sarah whispered, "tell them I'm coming." The negotiations took 3 months. Sarah never set foot on Earth again during that time. She lived aboard the alien ship, the name Bridge translated as something like honored fist of the Third Reach, learning their culture, sharing humanities, serving as the living bridge between species that her colleagues' AI had tried to be. The beings she met were called, as closely as human mouths could manage, the Koroth. They were nothing like the images from Earth's science fiction, no humanoid features, no familiar structures. They existed partially in dimensions humans could barely perceive, manifesting in 3-dimensional space as crystalline formations that flowed and reformed like living sculptures. They were warriors, yes, but they were also poets, philosophers, engineers. Their culture valued strength, but not mindless aggression. The challenge they'd believed they'd received actually excited them. They'd hoped humanity might be worthy peers, fellow travelers among the stars. Learning of the translation error had been humbling for both species. "We should have approached more carefully," communicated Kethrex,
the closest thing the Koroth had to a ship captain. The translation came through both Bridges' processors and Sarah's growing intuition for their language. We assumed understanding where none existed. This is wisdom we thought we had learned long ago. We assumed our technology could replace true communication. We rushed when we should have been patient. That's on us. Perhaps Kethrex flowed into a pattern that Sarah had learned meant contemplation. Or perhaps this is how first contact must always be, clumsy, dangerous, saved only by the willingness of individuals to risk everything for understanding. By the time Sarah returned to Earth, humanity and the Koroth had established a real communication protocol. Not perfect, it might never be perfect, but honest, built on patience and the acknowledgement that mistakes would happen, would keep happening, and that the effort to understand was more important than the achievement of perfect translation. She landed in Geneva to crowds and cameras, accolades and awards that felt both meaningful and absurd. They called her a hero. They called her the savior of humanity. But Sarah knew the truth was more complex. She'd simply been willing to be vulnerable, to show the truth rather than hide behind language. In that, she'd been no braver than anyone else who'd ever reached across a divide hoping to be understood. The Koroth remained in orbit, slowly building a station where humans and their kind could meet, trade, learn. It would take generations to really understand each other. Perhaps they never would. But they were trying. And in a universe vast and strange, full of beings whose minds worked in utterly alien ways, trying was enough. Sarah stood in her old office at the SETI facility, looking at the same monitors where she'd first seen the signal that changed everything. Marcus stood beside her, older now, tired but content. "Was it worth it?" he asked quietly. She thought about the question, about the fear and the hope, the mistakes and the corrections, the war that almost was, and the peace that barely survived. "Ask me in 100 years," she said with a slight smile. From space, a signal arrived, not mathematics this time, but something the Koroth had been teaching humanity, harmonics that conveyed emotion more than meaning, a greeting, a friendship offered not as a challenge, but as a gift. Sarah smiled and began composing a response, word by word, concept by concept, being careful with each choice. There were no perfect translations, she'd learned, but there could be honest ones. And sometimes that made all the difference.